Oop meets her son for the first time in 5 years. I am not Oop. Oop is worried mama 87. My son wants to meet for the first time in 5 years December 10th, 2022. This is a throwaway account and English is not my first language. I, 35F, gave birth to my son more 17 years ago. His father, my ex, 40M, was my then boyfriend who, after a while I realized, groomed me. I married him soon after our son was born and was truly in love with him, but it seemed he was only interested in having young girls. When our son was 11 and I was 29, my ex cheated on me with an 18-year-old girl. When I found out, I divorced him and it was messy. My ex made more than me and barely spent time at home, and while I was the one who disciplined our son and was worried about him, his father was the cool parent, never made him do his homework, always let him eat whatever he wanted, always bought him gifts and all that. Because of it, my son was closer to his father than with me. When the time came for us to decide custody, my son said he wanted to live full-time with his father. It pained, but I respected it. I told my son that if he ever changed his mind, my door would always be open for him. During the first year, I called him and tried to spend time with him, but he never seemed into it. After a year, he stopped picking up my phone calls. He moved to another home and changed his phone number. My former in-laws, 62M, 62F, were my rock in all this. They supported me emotionally and would give me updates on my son's life. They tried many times to convince my son to talk to me without any success. Around 3 years ago, I met my now husband, 36M. We married 2/5 of a year ago after we found out we were pregnant. My in-laws were invited. I cried during my wedding because I missed my son and I wanted him there. My Phil was KY's shoulder to cry on. He told me that sooner or later my son would realize how bad his father treated me and would try to reconcile. I went on and gave birth to my beautiful twin daughters, 2F. Not going to lie, I also cried when they were born. Part of it was of joy and the other was out of sadness my boy wasn't with me. Not a day goes by in which I don't think about him. I missed more than anything. I have a few pictures of us in my new home and sometimes I still cry thinking about him. I know what's going on in his life based on what his grandparents tell me, but I still miss him deeply. Yesterday my Mill called me. We are having our normal convo and then she tells me that my son was living with them because he and his dad had fought. My Mill then tells me that my son wanted to see me. Based on what she says, my son misses me. I asked her to give me some time. We ended our convo and then I started crying again. I want to meet my son, to hold him, to feel him, to tell him how much I love him and how much I have missing him. But I am also afraid. I am afraid he gets mad at me for moving on. I don't want him to think I have replaced him with my daughters. Then I started thinking, why didn't I tried harder? Why did I give up so easily? I really don't know what I should do. Relevant comments from Oop. And if he's asking to see you now, he's loved and missed you too. I know that, but part of me feels guilty. I feel as if O should have asked his grandparents for his number and tried harder. You also owe your former in-laws a world of gratitude. I know it. Ever since I have met them, they have never been nothing but kind to me. They treat me as their daughter and they are truly like parents to me. Another from Oop. I would move heaven and earth for a mom as caring and sweet as what you are. Thank you so much for your words. They made my day truly. Just go to him and be the wonderful mom you are. I'm going to do that. Update December 17th, 2022. I called in my laws so I could know about why my son fought with his dad and what he knew. My in-laws told me that we, my son and me, should talk about it. Why my son and my ex fought, and that they didn't told anything to my son because they believed it wasn't their place to. 2 days ago I visited my in-laws. They received at their door and told me my son was at the living room. They left the house so that me and my son could have some time alone. When I got to the living room, I saw my son for the first time in 5 years. He had grown up so much. I was barely able to hold myself. I said hi and asked him how he was. He was looking down. He said he was sorry for everything, for abandoning me and for not being in my life. He told me he would understand if I hated him. As soon as he said it, I just started crying and hugged him as tight as I could. I told him I never hate him, that I could never hate him, that he was my precious baby boy and that I have been missing him more than anything. We were crying pretty hard. After a while I broke off the hug. I was playing with my son's hair and I was looking at him. He was still looking down. I told him he didn't had to be ashamed. I looked up at me. I was still crying but I started smiling. I told my son how beautiful he was. Then I became a little more emotional again and told him he had grown so much. He started crying more and kept saying, "I'm sorry." I buried his head on my chest and told him to cry all he needed because I was there for him. After a while he was calmer. I asked him why he fought with his dad. He said his father manipulated him. His father made him believe I was a fool and that I hated him. He and his dad fought because my dad met me and his dad got mad. They fought about it and my son is now living with his grandparents because of it. My son asked me about my life. I told him I had gotten remarried to a good man and had 2 twin daughters. My son asked if he could see some pictures of them. I showed him some pictures and started crying again and said he was sorry again. We spent the rest of the evening catching up and my son asked me if I could sleep with him. I told him I would have to talk to my husband. I called my husband. He said it was okay if I slept with my son and that he was so happy for me. Me and my son slept in his room. It reminded me when we slept together when he was a baby. After my son was already asleep, I started crying out of happiness. TLDR. I finally have my boy back. Relevant comments from Oop. Don't you dare doubt about my love towards my son. Nothing has pained me as hard as to not having a relationship with him. What else should I do? He didn't wanted to see me. He was 12. Any court would take his wishes into consideration. I find your love for him to have already been distanced and has limits. When I hugged, I cried as I never did. He's my precious baby boy. I cried so many nights because I missed him. When my daughters were born, I cried so hard because I wanted him with me. I didn't choose my new family over him. Update 2. My son meets his sisters December 21st, 2022. Sai, 35F. Have a son, 17M, who I have not seen for 5 years. Recently we reconnected. In those 5 years, I got remarried to my new husband, 36M, and had 2 daughters, 2F, 2F. I was planning on introducing my daughters to their brother because I truly wanted them to have a relationship. Yesterday, my son and my daughters finally met. I took my girls to the park and my son was already there. My daughters are somewhat shy, but after a while they opened up to my son. I was truly happy to see all my babies getting along so well. When it came time to going home, my son hugged his sisters tight and kissed them in the forehead. I asked my daughters if they liked the brother and they said they did. Earlier this morning, one of them asked me when were they going to see their brother again. I am so happy my boy and my girls like each other so much. I've dreamt about it so much. I can't wait for Christmas to come so we can all spend it together.
I am not the Oop.
Those in-laws, man, goddamn. I'm glad Oop didn't lose too many years with her son. And I hope they can be happy going forward. I am unsurprised an 11-year-old chose to stay with the fun parent. I'm glad he eventually realized that he's better off without dad. This poor family. I'm glad they could come back together again. The son is reaching the same age as the girls his father prefers. I wonder what he thinks of his father's attitude towards his female friends. And if that's factored into him having better perspective on who his mother is. Man, that ex-husband must be really awful for the in-laws to back her all this time. $5 says his dad tried to sleep with his GF nauseated face. If the in-laws stayed by her side, you know they aren't fooled by their son. Imagine knowing the kind of person your son grew up to be. I married him soon after our son was born and was truly in love with him, but it seemed he was only interested in having young girls. I shuddered. Parental alienation really sucks. It's one of the few estrangement situations, it may be the only one, where the estranged parent was not primarily responsible for the estrangement and the children aren't to blame because they are under the thumb of a master manipulator. And the estranged parent is just racked with guilt because they wish they could have done more but also know that they couldn't. It's so heartwarming to see that this one has been resolved positively. Edit. Rewording. When it came time to going home, my son hugged his sisters tight and kissed them in the forehead. I asked my daughters if they liked the brother and they said they did. Earlier this morning, one of them asked me when were they going to see their brother again. I'm not crying. You're crying. I can't imagine how abusive that man is for this mother to think she couldn't demand visits and updates and communications. Sure, courts will take kids' opinion into consideration, but they won't remove all parental rights based on it. Oh, I loved this one. I couldn't sleep thinking about each of the updates. I'm glad that my comments on her post helped make her decision to see her son. Smiling face with hearts. WTF is it with people in the comments bashing Oop for doing what she could do? Was she supposed to keep calling him and not having her calls picked up for 5 years? Was she supposed to basically stalk him and end up with a criminal record for it? Jesus. She did the best she could. And blaming her is disgusting. If Reddit has taught me anything, it's that families with twins have all the trauma. Reminds me of the time I was 22 and my boyfriend of 2.5 years left me for an 18-year-old. He was 36 ROFL. The ex first manipulated her and later on the son, deaf. An expert in manipulating kids, skeptical smiley face. I bet the dad was poisoning him against Oop. The level of detail put into this show never fails to impress. Hallelujah. This is a great outcome. The ex's parents clearly recognized him for what he was and were extremely respectful to everyone. They didn't force an agenda. They updated the op with what was going on, but kept everything separate. They didn't harp on their narcissistic son to let his ex have contact with their son. And they didn't guilt the son into having contact with his mother or let him know what was happening until they had a chance to talk. I wonder if they have some background in psychology. And they might if their son, or other kids, had issues when they were growing up. Just because you have an ass of a kid doesn't necessarily mean that it's because of their upbringing. There are many other things in play there. God bless those in-laws. Well, now I'm crying.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Cast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.